All righty. I think I've got the green light to get started. So, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us for today's webinar brought to you by Schoolytics. Today, we are going to be unpacking 4 components of an impactful data culture in schools.
I'm super excited.
We've got 2 very excited speakers with us who I will introduce momentarily. But before we get into that, a quick agenda. So we'll start with some introductions of our 2 speakers today. We'll also jump into a definition so we can all be kind of on the same page with what is a data culture? What are we talking about when we talk about a data culture in schools specifically? From there, we'll unpack the 4 key components of an impactful data culture in schools. And we'll also look at some warning signs that maybe your data culture is deteriorating or needs a little TLC. And we'll share some improvement tips to help you make those strides and those gains to ensure that you're allowing teachers and their students to be truly data-driven in the classroom. We'll wrap up with some Q&A. So within Zoom, you should have the functionality to ask a question. You should see a little Q&A box in your panel. So don't hesitate to ask questions there. We're going to save some time at the end to answer as many of those as we can. So with that, I will introduce our speakers for today. We have Dr. Anna Hartranft. She is our Director of Instructional Technology here. And Anna, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, happy to, Ben. Thank you. So I started out as a special educator and got some Orton Gillingham training, worked with students with dyslexia, and found I just loved instruction and I loved teacher communities. Went back to school for a little bit, got the doctorate, and I've worked in public and charter schools. And when I found Schoolytics, that was enough to actually pull me out of the classroom. It was challenging to leave that in classroom community, but what we offer was so terrific. I felt like it was worth it.
Well, we are definitely lucky to have you here, Anna. She is a wealth of knowledge for us and the team here at Schoolytics. Joining Anna today, we have Tyson Jurgens, our VP of Marketing. And Tyson, tell us a little about your background as well, please.
Oh boy, yeah, where to start? I taught in the classroom as well. I was a second grade teacher for a few years, and then got my education leadership master's. So I never actually became a principal. Ed tech pulled me really fast, Anna.
Right.
So I've been working in ed tech companies for about the last 10 years, doing a lot of client implementation and training, traveling all over the country and training principals, and then moved into marketing. So really engaging with teacher communities and educator communities to put the right tools in their hands.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyson. I am just now realizing that I never introduced myself, so I'll share that as well. My name is Ben Sperry. I'm the marketing manager here at Schoolytics. I'm a former second grade teacher as well. We have a lot of former teachers on staff here at Schoolytics. It's a big part of how we build our team. So that's me. Those are our speakers. With that, I will hand it over to Tyson to drive the conversation from here. So take it away, Tyson.
Cool. All right. We'll see you in a little bit, Ben. Before we get started, I just wanted to unpack why is it that Schoolytics is talking about data culture right now? Why is it that this group of educators has some opinions about data culture? And we've been working with hundreds of educators, thousands of educators, hundreds of schools around the country, trying to get them to use data, to help them use data to drive instruction more effectively. And one thing that we've seen is there are some schools where instantly the staff gets it, the administrators get it, and they're working together to make really data-driven instructions. And then there are other schools where even with all of the right data and all of the right tools, there's still a challenge to really make data hum and sing at that school. Anna, is that something that you've experienced in supporting the educators in Schoolytics as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers, we're a relatively new company, so teachers have mostly sought us out as a way to fill that gap in needing access to data. Teachers want access to data based on their classroom instruction, not just that one end of the year assessment time point. And there are not a lot of options out there that really connect data for teachers and make it actionable.
Yeah. When I think about the last 15 or 20 years in the education industry, there's been a lot of using data in a way that scares teachers. There's been a lot of punitive uses of data. And so I think we've kind of established a culture of data fear maybe, or data secrecy, you know, like we've passed laws, we've vilified teachers sometimes. So there's definitely some culture work that we need to do to make everybody really comfortable and confident using data. And that's why we wanted to chat about this today. You know, what are some ways that school leaders in particular can foster and nurture a data culture that allows teachers to be analytical and to make important decisions on the fly, you know, using all their best intuitions. So to start with that, let's, you know, really unpack, like, what does a data culture mean? That seems like kind of a fuzzy, ethereal thing that might be hard to grasp, but in reading around, I found from the REL in Appalachia a really fantastic definition of data culture. And this has a little bit of cobbling together of some phrases. But I like this for a couple of reasons. Not only does it tell what it is, you know, it's a commitment that's, you know, between people. It describes data at the school and classroom level. So we're not just talking about one student, one teacher. I love that it talks about collaboration and empowerment. Again, that is a thing that professionals do together, teachers do together with one another. And it really ends on making decisions. You know, it ends on, you don't just look at data for the sake of it or for the fun of it. Like, you do it so that you can teach better tomorrow and you can intervene with students better this afternoon. And so you can engage parents more effectively next quarter. There's always some sort of action or choice or decision that comes out of it. And I really love that little bit about accountability too, because I think that in a data culture that is thriving and trustworthy, that accountability comes naturally, and it isn't scary and it isn't punitive. There's a lot of shared vulnerability and safety in a data culture. And so that accountability doesn't feel scary the way that it can sometimes.
Yeah, and just to pick up really quickly,
Yeah.
so with ed tech, I think we've really kind of turned some of the data culture or the data piece on its head, and because all of these ed tech platforms are offering teachers access to data that they didn't necessarily have before. And I know we're going to get into it. Jumping right in, very excited, but it's great to have that ed tech experience, because I think that's changed what's possible for data culture. We've been saying so much that we want data, we want to use data, but if you haven't had the data, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, and that's such a great point, that the availability of the data might have outpaced our culture fostering.
Right.
Now, there's so much data, but we haven't talked about why we use it and who sees it and why we look at it together. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I took the liberty of going through this definition and highlighting a couple of things that feel like kind of shared DNA. I like the words commitment and empowerment really blended together for me. The idea that happens across schools and classrooms and the idea of collaboration felt really married to me. That data and decisions, obviously, those two things go hand in hand. We use data in order to make decisions. And again, that accountability and that improvement muscle that a school staff community needs to practice and foster really connected to me too. So naturally, if you see these four colors, you can see that I think where I'm going is that these really make up our four components of a data culture. Here's this framework that we put together. I hope this helps demystify a little bit about what are the components of a data culture that are identifiable. And what that can do is let us see what might be struggling, what's excelling, and then if it is struggling, I kind of fix it. And I think about these kind of like a four-legged stool. If you cut one of the legs off, or if one of them's a little bit short, you know, you might be wobbly, but you can still probably sit, you know, for a while. You might be a little bit uncomfortable. If you cut it too short, you might actually just tip right over. But if more than one are not very strong or sturdy, then that sitting situation isn't going to work out at all. So these really do have to work in tandem, and a really effective school leader is going to think about nurturing all of these at the same time and identifying areas of improvement. So it should come as no surprise that obviously a data culture needs really strong trust first and foremost. And when you see trust in a data culture, like, tell me a little bit about what that means to you, and have you ever seen that working really well in a school, let's say?
Sure. So trust is really where you'd start. And I love that that's where we're starting. because everything in a school community is around trust. There's trust between the student and the teacher. Everything is about relationships, and that's something that's hard to quantify. And I don't think that it's even fruitful to try to quantify it too much, because there's a reason that there's qualitative and quantitative science, right? Like, we are human beings, and the trust component is so important. And I think you spoke a little bit to where we maybe started with data and that pendulum swing. And when something that's supposed to be helpful is used as like a hammer or a gotcha, that erodes trust.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we're kind of moving backwards to try to build trust first, and then you can move on to the others.
That's such a great point, that I think there's a reason this one was first. And it's like, if you don't have trust of your staff, none of these other things are possible. So that really should be kind of the first order of business for a school leader. And, we talk about culture and trust among staff in lots and lots of ways. And I think the data culture component isn't that different. But I like what you said about the fact that we might be making up for some lost time here. We might be repairing damaged trust over the last who knows how many years. So that takes extra care and extra consideration that can't really be taken lightly. The next component that's really that we're going to unpack a little bit here today is the concept of targets. And there's a lot of words that we might throw around to talk about like what it is that we're measuring. We might use metrics or goals. And all of those have a really clear rationale. But the reason I like targets for this is that it helps everybody understand where we're going and what we're measuring and how we're measuring it. Like all of that's baked into the concept of a target. And I think once you have that trust, we can talk about what kind of data do we hold important as a school? What are we going to be measuring and monitoring, and how are we going to be measuring and monitoring it? Anna, what do you think about the concept of targets here?
I love the targets. As coming from the special educator, goal setting, objectives, that is where you start. And I'm really excited to talk about some ways to kind of hone in on different targets and build that shared vision. I think the targets are essential. You have to agree on what you're trying to do and before you set out. So it's nice to have this conversation now at the end of the school year, at least for most US based schools, because you've got some of the data on how you may have met. Which targets did you meet? Which did you not meet? You're not going to solve everything every year. And once you have the trust, then you're lining up those targets for next year. So this is what we did. What's going to happen next year?
I love targets too, because it doesn't just mean where do we want to get by the last day of school. You can also have targets that are monthly. You can have targets that are, we always want to have 97% attendance, and that just becomes like a daily target. We can have targets for lots of types of data, not just that summative end of year big scary number. So we'll talk a little bit about how to make targets something that we talk about continuously. This next one's a little bit challenging to talk about, because I was really struggling to come up with a word for this component. And I landed on skills, which I think is pretty good. But wrapped up into this concept of skills, or in particular, that your educator, your staff's experience and comfortability and fluency with data analysis. And I think back to my teacher education, like I don't think I got a lot of like data analysis education. Certainly not on the types of apps or software components or websites or data that teachers have in the classroom today. And like reflecting back in your teacher training, like what sort of data analysis training did you get?
Well, credit to TERPS and University of Maryland, some pretty good training.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking about this component of the data culture, even in the last 2 years, in the last year, like there are new tools every year. So as a educator, you're really a learner first. You're learning these new tools. And then you're applying them and you're teaching them. So yes, we've advanced pretty far beyond, like, yes, we were using spreadsheets and just like a few trackers.
Yeah.
Now, the good news is that you don't have to do it manually. There's so much automation and so much analytic software that wasn't available.
Yeah.
Wish it was when I was back in SPED and you're building all of the, you're putting in your CBM data and it's like, okay, this is the week 1, this is the week 2. Well, now with EdTech platforms, that's already there for you.
Yeah.
So now the skill, fortunately, is less about data entry for the most part and more about, well, you have the result, what are you going to do? And what used to take you a week, hours to put in, now you have the answer. So that's what I'm excited to talk about, is what do you do with those results?
Yeah, I love that it's not just skills with the data, it's skills with the tools, skills with the platforms, and even skills with the intuition and the analysis and the decision making. Those are all data skills that as a school staff need to be coached and reinforced and supported. And knowing that every single teacher is on a different pathway to their data comfort, data fluency, data confidence. Everyone needs their own, almost like a differentiated learning plan.
Yes.
Totally. So the last component that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the concept of a data process. And I think the reason that this one comes last is it incorporates all of these other things. It really thinks about what data are we capturing? Where is that data going? Who can access it, see it, manipulate it? How often are we sharing and talking about it? Really building those data practices into the week of a school, into the process that teachers go through. What do you think?
I think this is the key. I think a lot of schools get the first 3 right, but it's all about how you operationalize. And if you build an amazing spreadsheet, if you purchase an amazing tool, it's all about how often you're returning to it and actually coming back to it. So the process, practice, that is essential. And like you were saying with the stool analogy, if you don't have the process in place and you're not going to come back to these data sets, they're not going to help.
And, I'm just going to pop back to our definition really quickly. And I want to think about if that process isn't there, can the decisions get made? Can the accountability be shared? Can continuous improvement even happen if there isn't a chosen and established process for consuming data, analyzing data, and then acting on it? So really, I think the process is a nice synthesis of all of these components.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
Okay, we're going to dig a little bit into each one of these. I'm super excited, Anna, to talk about these. And I don't want this to get into a too negative place because the point of this is not your data culture is on fire. But what we're talking about here is ways to look really critically at this component of a data culture, understand if this is an area where your school actually needs some targeted support, some focus and intervention to improve, and then some ways that we can make some improvements. And if I were to ask you, what might it look or sound like if a school had a trust problem when it comes to their data culture? What are some things that would come to mind to you? What are some of those ooh, red flags?
I think that, so I've been there in the back to school class, the back to school meeting, and your admin is bringing all the tools that you're going to use that year, and they're setting the targets. But if there's not any opportunity for collaboration and input from the teachers on what those targets are, I'm scared as a teacher or as a coach, because I am not sure if my input is going to be valid. Mm-hmm. What I would love to see is I'd love to see access to last year's data. So for admin, part of developing trust is building that relationship within the community, within the school community. So a lot of the time you're a third grade teacher, you're looking at the third grade curriculum, but who you really want to talk to is the second grade teacher.
Right?
They just had all the kids and they know. And if you don't have time for that exchange and building trust and all of that really rich qualitative data that the second grade teacher has, something's going to be lost. So I think there's trust between staff. I'd started talking about earlier, trust between students and teachers. There's trust at every level of relationship. And I love when transparency around data is there, because that fosters trust.
Yeah.
Because it's open.
I love that you talked about the trust between teachers. You know, this isn't just a relationship between each individual teacher and the principal or the instructional coach. A community of trust means that everyone has really high faith that everybody else is operating with the best of intentions, with the best information, and to the best of their abilities. And the opposite of that is shame. You know, I can remember feeling those times when I really wanted to close my classroom door and not let anyone in, because I was nervous that something my students might look too loud, or we might be, I don't know, I didn't feel safe that another teacher could see what was happening in my classroom and instantly know this is great teaching, you know. So I think about what mistrust looks like, you know, and how you know that a teacher might be nervous to share their data or to really look at their data with their instructional coach. Yeah, that's too bad. And I think, you know, to your point earlier, repairing trust takes a lot of work. When I think about some of the ways that a school administrator can do that, I think in a previous conversation we had, you mentioned teacher intuition, that like as pedagogical experts, teachers take in thousands of data points every hour in terms of who's out of their seat and who has a pencil that's not sharp and who didn't turn in their homework. And it's just a constant influx of data. And they're so used to making really fast decisions without even thinking about it. And so honoring that and realizing that teachers are true data experts and that they're already really far along their data analysis journey does a lot to repair trust, you know.
Absolutely.
And again, I come back to vulnerability. I would love to see administrators be vulnerable and instructional coaches be vulnerable and to treat each other with care and consideration, you know?
Yeah. Without jumping too much ahead to other points, because of course these all are interwoven, but thinking about this particular pillar, when administrators are looking for the path forward, for experts, for what are we going to do to improve, I think what's most often overlooked is all of the experts they have in their building. One way you develop trust is by acknowledging, like you just said, that most of the expertise is going to come from their staff.
Yeah.
You don't need another, the answer is not just another program. The answer is the staff who are here and who keep coming every day and who care about the kids and the program. So I think any way to recognize teacher well-being, to recognize teacher expertise, that develops trust.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we're going to keep coming back to trust as we unpack some of the other ones too, because it's just so foundational to building any sort of advanced data culture, you know. There's no ignoring it. In the interest of time though, let's talk a little bit about targets. And this one's tricky because I feel like so often we're given targets, we're handed targets, and there's not a lot of ownership. We know what students need to score on the map, and we know what students need to, where they need to be if they're Lexile. Like we're kind of handed all of these places where students should be. So it would be really easy to just skip over this section entirely. But that would be a shame, you know? Yeah.
Because I think right now we are much more target oriented as educators. We're held to standards, which on the whole is a good thing. But what becomes unclear, I think, often is how do we get to the standard? So what I love is those benchmarks, those interim assessments, and then again, this is a special educator in me, let's backwards map, let's break down that standard. How are we going to actually get there? We all want to get there, but like you mentioned, using data daily, what did today's data, what did today's exit ticket tell me as a teacher? Before EdTech, before digital revolution, before Chromebooks, teachers were still making decisions every day very effectively. It was time consuming, but that was the dedication to the job. And the good news is that as you digitize a lot of that, not all of it, but as you digitize a lot of it, you get your results in seconds. And you used to spend, like, I know you've told me, you take your papers out with you and like you're going to the, to the picnic, to the happy hour, to whatever, like I'm grading and I'm listening. Now you don't have to do that as much. You have the data already. But it starts with the targets. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the 5 Ws. I know that that's something that you speak really well to. So maybe pick up that thread.
Yeah, I in thinking about what goes into a target, there's so many little components that are just, again, really easy to smooth over. Let's say we're talking about, as a school, we've decided that one of our kind of power standards is going to be fractions. Like our students struggle with fractions, ratios, percentages like year over year. So as a whole school, we're really going to dive into that. Great. That sounds like a really great aspirational goal. What does it look like? So when you break that down, we need to figure out like, well, what are we actually tracking? Are we looking at students' homework completion when it comes to their fraction homework? Are we looking at, do we have an online like learning platform that they're going to be completing fractions modules in? What are we measuring? I think that's a big one. How is it getting measured? Is this manual data from like teachers entering it into a chart paper? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a Google sheet that we're all editing? How is that data being collected is important. How often? Is this a thing? Are we looking at this weekly? Should every teacher be teaching fractions weekly, or is this every month, or is it just in third quarter? So every single one of these W's, the who, what, where, when, why, and even how, becomes really critical when you're talking about targets, because if you don't lay those all out, it becomes really hard to get on the same page and to really start rowing together as a school to make some of those big changes happen. And it can lead to, this teacher's teaching awesomely, but is capturing data in a really different way than this other teacher, which is, and then it's really hard to see.
Exactly. It's like we need those connected data systems that put all the data in one place and help standardize it. So you can come to the PLC meeting with standardized data and things that allow you to tag your data by a common standard or by, like you said, that focus standard, fractions. It doesn't have to be in the full Common Core or the full state standard. It can be your shorthand, which is whatever, fractions. Now, of course, I can't think of something off the top of my head, but, informational text, key details. You're using that teacher shorthand. You need a data tool that allows you to track everything that you're already doing. So when you come together as a team, you can see those data points.
Yeah. And there's that shared aspect. And again, we're building on trust here. If we come together and set these targets and these benchmarks, and like every month we're making incremental improvement, A, the trust has to be there. And B, I think it would be really hard if a teacher, if a community of teachers, let's say a grade level team, was given a like, okay, your students need to be reading at a 10:30 Lexile by May 31st. Thinking like, it's August, like that's a really long ways away, setting those monthly incremental targets, setting those interim goals that we can celebrate progress, thinking about targets as a progression, not just that last day of school endpoint. I mean, just like we tell students, to celebrate their small learning progress over time. Don't just take that last end of the year test as or your final grade as like your worth or your value,
Right.
Same here. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about how like a community of teachers looks a lot like a community of students. And
It really does.
the things we do so naturally for students, we have a really hard time doing to ourselves, right? Yeah.
That's like teacher self-care is treating yourself with the same respect and giving yourself the time to learn that you give to your students. You don't expect them to learn it on the first day, and you give them lots of tools and resources. You let them know where they are. That's the shared targets part, the visibility, the trust. So let's talk about how we get there.
That sounds like a perfect time to move on.
Right?
And so again, this one was really tricky because skills contains a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
We're talking about not only the skills to look at a table of data or a spreadsheet of data and know what to do with it, but also to how to operate the systems where that data lives, how to operate filters and other kind of common data tools. Wherever you're looking at data, they're going to be pretty common kind of schemas, but also that comfort level. That the fluency, like, how quickly can you do this data analysis, or does it take you 6 hours? Because then you're probably not going to do it very often, if it's hard. And, when I think about the warning signs for where these deficiencies might be, then take a little bit of looking, because we're pretty good at glossing over the things that we struggle with,
Yeah, and this is where the vulnerability comes in. And I think the thing that I'm really excited about when I hear about PD research is that some of the best professional development for teachers is teacher-led. So as an admin, leverage your teachers who are in the building. If your school is still standing after this last year, you probably have a few good teachers.
Yes.
Ask them to weigh in on the PD calendar for next year, or have a reserved once a month PD session that's dictated by teacher choice.
Yes.
What do the teachers want to know more about? You've bought an amazing tool. There's so many amazing tools out there. What I hear every day in the joy of talking with teachers is that they just don't have time to look at the new tools. And so again, the same way that you would with your students, give them time to learn the new tools. Don't expect it to be overnight.
Right.
And also the data skills are really are interwoven with the process, which comes next. So I see we have the importance of logging all data. That's so important. If you only have time on Fridays and you're planning to log data, then you're just maybe logging Friday's data, and you don't have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So putting in all of the data, if you have to do that manually, that's going to take time. So go with systems that do it automatically.
Yes.
That's easier.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, the data skills, it can't be overlooked that we need more time to practice with all this new ed tech stuff.
Yeah.
And we need skills to be data literate as teachers.
I think when I think of the most deft schools that do this so well right now, data is almost not at all an additional chore or task.
Yeah.
It just seamlessly comes from the systems that they're already using. It's generated by the lessons they're already teaching and delivering. It's being captured from the homework that students are already submitting. Like, it's not an extra task if it's done well. So it doesn't feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like a thing that we have to make an inordinate amount of time for, or like build an extra, take instructional minutes and like put them to data entry. No, please no, it's 2022. Our systems are smarter than that,
Exactly.
And I think one component here that we're chatting about is that we really need to expand our concept of what data means. Because for a really long time, when we talked about data, we talked about kind of summative test scores. We talked about end of quarter or year results. But there's a trove of data that happens before that result occurs that we can be using if we're smart enough to capture it and model it. We should be looking at attendance patterns. We should be looking at homework and parent involvement. And these are all really important data points that could be used to flag early interventions, that could be used to yeah, be more effective, more earlier, in the school year. As long as we're capturing it and as long as we know how to consume it and make choices.
Exactly. All the research that I've read in the last year on what teachers want access to the data that's already being collected.
Yeah.
If there's survey data, if there's PBIS data, attendance data, teachers are not saying that they don't want access to the data. They want time to review it, and they want to know how to learn the new platform. So you buy this expensive SIS, or you buy this extra test assessment platform. It takes time to learn that. And if you're not going to knit them all together, which I'd recommend you just go ahead and put them together. If you're not going to do that, then you do need to give teachers logins to all of the different platforms and not rely just on one person to print that out and to forward it, because I've been in that position before and I'm having to ask, hey, can you send me the latest results from Lexia? Can you send me the results from whatever? And that's taking time. Again, these are interwoven. The trust, transparency, having access to the data allows you to develop the data skills and not have it just be the quarterly data review. And that's the only time you get to look at data.
I feel like I wish there was like a mic drop option here, Anna, because that said something that was so illuminating to me, which is that, a lot of our schools and districts are set up to have almost like data guardians.
Yeah.
That I don't want to say they hoard the knowledge or hoard the skills, but part of having a data culture that is shared and communal is that the access to data is shared in a way that is, safe and secure and doesn't, allow staff to see data that they shouldn't see, IEPs or whatever. But that also the skills are shared in terms of, everyone has the ability to get the information they need and to peruse it the way that they need and to sort it and filter it the way that they need. That doesn't just belong to someone in the central office that becomes the data giver,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, if people today walk away with one little nugget, I think that's what I would love it to be. Don't be a data guardian. Okay, let's talk about process, because I feel like we've been leading up to this one a few different times. We've mentioned like, well, we'll get to that when it comes to the process. And this one's the meatiest. This one's the hardest, I think. This is the one that takes a lot of forethought.
Yeah. And so for this one, I was thinking, I think what this comes back to is a lot of calendaring and scheduling.
Not easy.
Yes, it's a nightmare. Yes, it takes the whole summer, but it's so important to set up times so that people who need to talk to each other and plan together can plan together. Yep. So many times I've worked in schools where the third grade team is never able to talk with the science teacher because their planning periods don't overlap. Mm-hmm. So you're not able to chat. You need to build your calendar, not only for students and for when students need breaks and they need lunch, et cetera, but also planning in time for PLCs before the school year even starts. How often, Tyson, you've been in schools, how often is PD? It feels like an afterthought. It's like, oh, we have PD this month. We need to do a PD on something. That time needs to be set aside. Teachers need the break before they go into the PD. Like, don't have dismissal and PD be at the same time. Sorry, it's just gripes.
Oh, flashbacks.
The process matters, right? You can't be walking your kids out and in this amazing new PD on this cool data system. So carve out the time. And any time invested in your teachers is a huge investment in your school. And I know that administrators know that, but just to hear that one more time, when you can, delegate and have all of your supporting roles be supporting roles. When can a paraprofessional help with some type of data entry or sharing things so that your core practitioners, the teachers with the most expertise, can partake in the data meeting or the PD that's about the thing that they're teaching. Yeah. It's heartbreaking when the ELA teacher is not able to come to the ELA meeting because of a scheduling conflict. Like, we could have seen that.
Yeah. this also has me think of, there are so many ways now to do shared work, even if you're not in the same room, in the
True.
same hour. So investigate, what would it take if every teacher had, 15 minutes to review the data that we as a school, have decided to review, and on the cadence that we all decided that would be beneficial, not necessarily at the same time, but is the data available?
No, yeah, definitely.
Are the notes that they take visible to other teachers? Or does this kind of just like live in people's brains and then it's guarded? Like how generous are we being with our thoughts and our analysis?
Absolutely. I appreciate that push. You're right. We can do more things asynchronously. We can teach asynchronously.
We sure can.
Asynchronously. we didn't think we could do it, but yeah, that's where we are. Totally. You can record the meeting. You can make sure that everyone gets, there are systems, Schoolytics might be one of them, that allows you to send a weekly report to yourself.
Yes.
Email. Why not have that come to all your teachers 15 minutes, 30 minutes before the data meeting, so that everyone has that data delivered to their inbox.
Yeah. And then that time is useful and purposeful, and it's not spent like logging in, like that when those precious minutes that we are together are used in a really intentional and maximized way.
Yeah.
I also just love this last point about this like continuous data conversation language, like it should be an everyday, all the time. This isn't a thing that we only look at on the third Fridays of the month. This isn't a thing that we like reserve just for PLC time. Part of building a data culture and thinking about the process of building a data culture is having that be the language of teamwork, and what is the evidence that we're doing a really great job, because we're all trying so hard,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as an administrator, one thing you can do is help your teachers identify what they're already doing that is data. So like we had talked about earlier, teachers are using popsicle sticks, they're using all of their different ways of collecting data, recording it. Just add data to the top of it. Like your exit ticket is a data point.
Yes.
So you are continuously using data. You just might not have felt comfortable as a teacher pulling it up as a data point, but it is.
And that's the last one.
I
can't think of any way to top that. Oh my goodness.
It was an excellent conversation. I know I have a lot of takeaways from everything that y'all covered today, but I know that we are almost at time. We have a lot of very busy school leaders who have been with us for this conversation. Q&A, so we have time for probably just one question, unfortunately, if we can answer it quickly. So quite a few of the questions that came through were answered throughout the conversation. One that stuck out to me though, someone asked, many teachers are too overworked, under-resourced, both like physically and mentally, to adopt a new data process. Do either of y'all have any tips for encouraging teacher buy-in for a new data process at the school?
Absolutely. Tyson, can I take this one?
Please do.
All right, so I have to plug Schoolytics here because this is the reason that one of the amazing reasons that I love Schoolytics. It actually saves teachers time. Most tools will take some time to learn, but Schoolytics immediately saves you time. The time you invest in learning a data tool like Schoolytics will pay dividends by the end of the day. It'll pay dividends within 15 minutes. Things like sending a missing assignments report to all your students. You can send to that, sign up, learn how to send the report in less than 10 minutes. And that action right there would have taken an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you for calling out that teachers are overwhelmed. Yes, they are overworked. Look for tools that are going to immediately save them time.
If
I
I
love
may
that.
too, the can't be under stressed, the like what's in it for me component. It might take a little bit of laying out, like here's why a tool like this will be helpful. To Anna's point, will be time saving, will help you teach more effectively or intervene more quickly, or track interventions more thoroughly. You know, like there's that what's in it for me, I think is a strong component. Teachers need proof.
I love that. Great way to close it out. With that, I know we are like a minute over now, so I'll close this out very quickly. If you had a question that we did not answer today, or one comes to you after the fact, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find us at schoolytics.com. You can reach out to us on social media. We're across all social medias. We're very active on Twitter, so don't hesitate to reach out to us there. We really appreciated having all of you with us today. Anna, Tyson, thank you so much for the time. This was a great conversation.
I agree. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Always fun. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Take care.